At the table? Yeah, it looks like it.
2 o'clock, Roger.
Yeah, Kevin.
Do you kind of
There
want
we
me
go.
to, do you want me to run this from here?
Oh, you sure can.
Okay.
And I can run it from you. I can run it from you.
Okay, well, yeah, whatever your preference is, you're the chair.
Okay, we'll call a public outreach meeting to order. And the first item would be call the roll, please.
Mayor Dardis. Mr. Van Amberg. Mr. Whalen. Mr. Gust.
Yes, here.
Ms. Mastel. Mr. Pollock.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Steen. Mr. Olson.
Here.
Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
So by my tally, we've got 5 out of the 11 here. Is that right?
Correct. We need 7 for a quorum.
So we're a couple short.
Correct. We're too short.
I think. Yeah. So I think as long as we can go ahead with the meeting, but we won't be able to make any decisions or any votes or any recommendations. So let's go ahead with. We'll hold off on the minutes also from the last meeting and see if we get a couple more members. So the next item would be outreach activity review, and that would be Rocky, legislative topic.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This is Rocky Schneider with AE2S. Just want to confirm, can you guys see the PowerPoint presentation that we're sharing?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Just have the agenda up here. We're going to go through a couple slides that are just the agenda sections. Then we also have a more in-depth review of the communications plan that has a number of slides. And then there's 2 videos. The videos don't stream the best online, but we'll try that. Also sent out links ahead of time here so you can watch the videos on your own time, I guess, if you need to see them in better streaming format, I guess. But to go forward, legislative topics, there's a few legislative items I wanted to update the committee on that happened over the last month and want to keep you abreast of what's going on. The Cass County caucus meeting happened and Joel and myself attended. We talked about water funding related to kind of the recent dip in revenue from the state through the Resources Trust Fund and talked to the local legislators. I think this is a really big sort of thing for us in our past efforts. We have always had to have a lot of different legislative meetings. We've been one of the entities encouraging the Cass County legislators to really group together for projects like ours, where they kind of jointly support. And so we can come to them as one entity instead of, talking to lots of different individuals. So I think it's been a good development. They've been meeting on a regular basis about our project and others. And so they've been inviting us at a, regular interval. And so I think that'll be really helpful come next year at the legislative session. And maybe just a note on that, legislative session in North Dakota starts in January. They have not decided yet on what they're going to do or how it's going to change. I imagine there's going to come out with some sort of restrictions or schedule or something along the lines in the next couple of months, but I'll keep you up to date on that. Construction tour, you may have saw the news this morning. Left us a little vague on here just until we knew exactly what happened. It came together last minute, but Senator Hoeven and Colonel Jansen were in town yesterday out at the inlet structure site just south of Horace. Great tour, got some good media. They had 50 trucks of concrete get poured yesterday. So I think it was sort of a big progress development out there. And I think everything I heard, the tour went really well. Joel had a meeting with Congressman Armstrong a couple weeks ago when he was in town. So just kind of do the regular updates. That sort of covers 2 out of the 3 North Dakotans. I know Senator Kramer's staff was out at the tour yesterday as well, and we're looking to try to do an event in the future with him as well. Keeler Town Hall. This is Heather Keeler. She was the DFL candidate for the Moorhead district for the legislature. She had invited Joel and myself to her town hall where the diversion topic was the sort of topic of the day at our town hall. Joel attended that. He got a lot of good questions. I think it helps whenever we do that because we know what's on the minds of the citizens over there. And so I think it was helpful to get face-to-face time answering some of the questions. Maybe Joel can update on that more when he comes. Any questions on those items? Maybe I'll just add, with the legislature coming up in North Dakota and we have another funding request, we are going to start meeting as a staff, as a North Dakota legislative group. Again, it's a kind of an ad hoc meeting that we have every 2 years that meets for about 4 or 5 months, before and after the session to coordinate on those issues. So we expect to do that again over here in the next couple months. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the next set of items here. Again, these are more just updates. I think there's been a lot going on, and that's a good thing. We expect an awful lot to happen in the next month as well. One of the biggest things is the CLOMR, which is the conditional letter of map revision from FEMA. This is really the sort of pre-approval from FEMA of the hydraulic model, and it really kind of says if you build the project you're intending to, here's how it changes the floodplain. So it works, as a good measure for us on how the area will be benefited. Homes will not be required to purchase the flood insurance, those type of maps, but it also really defines what the impacts are upstream. And so with the CLOMR, along with the mitigation plan that sort of outlines how we implement it based on state regulations, you kind of use those two data sets to be able to tell property owners exactly what the impacts are and exactly, how we plan to mitigate them. I'm going to pause for 1 second because it looks like somebody has some feedback, and so we'll just wait till that clears up. Okay. Just one other update on the CLOMR. We're sort of anticipating that the CLOMR will get final approval in the next couple of weeks. And what that triggers for us on the outreach side is a fairly large mailing. It'll go out to all upstream property owners, and it'll have an individual map talking about what the CLOMR shows of their area, their property. And, on the North Dakota side, we're maybe a little more defined in what the impacts are and what the mitigation plan means for that. The Minnesota side is a little more complicated because the permit conditions aren't yet final. And so we're working through that on how to give them the best information we have available at the time, so when that happens. Any questions on the CLOMR? I think it's a pretty good milestone for the project, so we're hoping to check that box.
And Rocky, the landowner notification or letter will describe, the impacts of their property. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, so I think the plan here is, off the top of my head, they're going to get 2 letters in the same packet. One will be from the Diversion Authority, and one will be from the acquiring entity, so either the Cass County Joint Water Resource District or the MCCJPA on the Minnesota side. And then along with that, we are planning a map. And the plan is to do an individual map of their property that shows what the model shows, the FEMA approved model for their property, along with next steps for their property, what that means in our acquisition process.
So Rocky, I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get this letter, is there contact information that'll be provided in the letter?
Yes.
Can be answered, or how are we going to answer questions?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on what property we're sending it to. I know part of the next steps for land acquisition is to start appraisals on all the structures upstream. And so, those properties that have a structure on it will probably have a more immediate next step and contact available. If it's a upstream property without a structure, I think some of those questions, we're leading them into, our flowage easement study. And I don't know, Eric, if there's anything Eric wants to add that I'm missing on here that would be helpful as far as contact.
Hi guys, Eric Dodds here. So the packet of info that we intend to send to property owners will be a letter from the Diversion Authority explaining that the Clomer has been hopefully approved, among other things. And then in the packet, there will also be a letter from the acquiring entity. So on the North Dakota side, that would be the Joint Board, and on the Minnesota side, it would be the MCCJPA. And those letters, our intention there would be to provide the property owners with some site-specific maps showing how their property is impacted, provide them some high-level information about the mitigation programs that have been developed as part of our mitigation plan. Also provide them with the name and contact information for a land agent that will be their primary point of contact, and give them the contact information for the Diversion Authority, the Joint Board, or the MIC Board. So lots of good information. I think for most property owners that we've had discussions with, they are anxiously awaiting more detail. I suppose for some property owners that might be a bit overwhelming, but we feel obligated to share with them as much information as we have. Also in those letters, we do intend to talk a little bit about the next steps. And if they have a structure that's impacted, we intend, I guess, as we know it today anyway, we intend to get started on doing the appraisals of those structure sites this fall. And then if they own land and eventually the project needs to buy a flowage easement, we will explain that, we're working our way through the flowage easement valuation process. At this point, and at the land committee coming up here in an hour, we have a presentation about the flowage easement valuation study that Crown Appraisals has just updated. And that's a precursor to valuing the actual easements on individual parcels. And so phase 2 of that study, we hope to get started later this year once we have the Clomer approval and mitigation plan approvals. So there's still some work to be done on flowage easement valuations, but I think we can explain where we're at to property owners and give them some good information in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Rocky.
The next item on here is the Drain 27 Wetland Restoration Landowner Meeting Recap. You've probably heard this at the last couple meetings. We've had 2 public virtual meetings with the different landowners and other members of the public. And earlier in August, we had an in-person meeting over at the old Fargo Commission room. I think it's called the Sky Commons now. And I think there was about 6 landowners there, if I recall. And it was good to be in person, of course. There's some limitation to virtual, but it was nice to get some more specific questions that they had submitted, the property owners in that area, and be able to walk through those questions with them. I think there'll be more on this topic at Land Management Committee, but wanted to let you know that we've held our 3rd meeting now with those landowners to try to really get ahead of this topic and be in as much communication as possible. And maybe the last item on here, just kind of a brief one too. I know Joel has done a lot of outreach with the area townships. We had a number of topics to talk with him about. He's making the rounds, talking to all the townships, and so I wanted to let the outreach committee know that outreach is happening. Kind of, making sure we're checking all the boxes there. Any question on property owner topics? Otherwise, I would like to spend some time on the communications plan before land management comes up. I think it'll be a little longer session.
Go ahead and go to the communications plan.
Okay, so then on the agenda, just to follow it, here's the other reports, but I'm going to go through the slides to talk about that. I'm going to skip this slide here to go to the table of contents of our communication plan. So for those in the room here, there is copies of the draft outreach or the communications plan. I did mail you out a link for those online. If somebody doesn't have it, I apologize for that. We'll get you one as soon as we can. It's about 70 pages, so it's a fairly large file, so just be aware of that as you're looking at it. Our intent here, sort of schedule of things, is we'd like to bring this draft for your review here there's a number of areas where we'd like some input, like some discussion on. I think that would be helpful. But this is not something we want to necessarily rush through and just approve, but this is a draft we're hoping to get done so we can share with the P3 proposers and share with the new director of communications if Joel brings one on board to kind of get the buy-in there. And so this will be maybe a couple month process to get, through final approval at the board, but obviously it's up to this committee to take those first steps as well. There's somebody on the line that's making a lot of paper shuffling noise. Is somebody moving their mic?
Yes. Somebody isn't muted.
Thanks. So just to walk through here, the last couple of months we have walked through a couple sections of this, and so trying to break this up into a little more manageable bites. And just for sake of brevity here, a lot of the brief history in section 1 there, we're not going to go through today, but it is good information in there. And the reason for that is, as the P3 proposer comes on board, they will bring a communications person. We have new staff coming on board at all times, it seems like, and so we're trying to have some of that, so make sure everybody gets up to that same base level of understanding on some of the history of how we got to where we are with communications and with the project. The second item on there is the demographics and survey and focus groups. We will just briefly cover that today, but we've gone through it more in depth previously, and there is even more in-depth analysis in the plan, so I encourage you to look at that. But we're really going to be looking at sections 3, 4, and 5, which is where we're talking about the target audiences and the methods of communications and what some of the new ideas that were brought out from the work that we did. So just a reminder, this was tried to make this a really data-driven process. I think, with so many different people involved in this, we always get a lot of opinions and insight from different people that are well ingrained into the community, into the project, and most of those are not at odds with each other, but occasionally they are. And so we really wanted to add some data to the decision-making process. And so we really looked at 3 types of data. We had tapestry data, which is sort of general demographics for the area that we can pull from a bunch of different sources. We did a survey of over 10,000 homes in the region here, and we got really great response. We got about 2,500 responses that we tracked and put into our system. Then we also did 10 different focus groups with a few dozen people that really got sort of more ingrained into some conversation and some open-ended questions and good discussion. There are a lot of ideas came out of that. So a brief overview, there's a lot more on the survey responses in here, and this committee's seen this before, but wanted to let you know that, again, this is just data-driven. A lot of the information we're going to show you is coming directly out of this process that we did. It was helpful. And my opinion is it would be helpful to do again at some point, just because this is a point in time. You don't really know how it's trending. These favorable, unfavorable, is that, has it gone up over the last 2 years? It's gone down. And so you don't really know if you've done well or not because you only have one data point. Focus groups, we had 10 of those. These were really helpful. Got a lot of sort of goals and what worked well, what hasn't worked well, and a lot of new ideas came out of this. And I'm going to talk more about this at a later agenda item too, on some of the thoughts we had on the benefits of this. But getting into the actual meat of the plan and maybe some of the outcomes is, first we wanted to identify that we have 2 different types of communication. There's internal and there's external. And some of the tools are the same for both, but the purpose is different, the audience is different, and the methods are different. And so you can see here we have 2 tables, basically who we're targeting for internal and who we're targeting for external. Not going to read the list to you there, but you'll see that list mentioned a number of times as we go through this. And I think there's different ways to target the different groups. This is a slide that's pretty critical, and I'd like some input on either today or take it back, read it, let me know what you think. These are 2 big things here. One, we have the guiding principles on the top right, which is a little tough to see in the room here, so maybe I'll read them. But the guiding communication principles, pretty simple. We've heard this over and over again from the different focus groups, but honesty, transparency, and clarity. And the guiding production principles are clear visuals, concise writing, and impactful storytelling. And I think some of those things we've done well and some of those things we haven't. It depends on what product or what deliverable you're looking at. And I think, but we've heard those in the public and we've heard those from the members we talked to. So as we look at those, we transition those into different goals. And so we established 3 goals for internal and 3 goals for external. For internal, we're really hoping our internal partners are informed about policy making and engaged in decision making. Their information is easily assessed by internal stakeholders, and the project progress is well understood and celebrated. And for our external audiences, we're hoping the audiences have knowledge of the project, that the information is easily accessible and transparent, and that the audiences are engaged in the project's progress and construction. 1 second. So keep that in mind, and we did use this use of icons. You'll see these icons pop up throughout the plan. So then we took a look at what's come out of the different data and the different focus groups, and then internally we looked at it. What methods are we currently using to target internal and external? And so you'll see, it's probably not a totally exhaustive list, but we tried to hit all the main things that we use for internal and external, and it's quite a list. And you'll see this on some of the graphs. We get pretty in depth into the various ways we do this. But I think this is important as we look to sort of analyze what's working and what's not working. And it's tough to answer those things on a general level because I think they work for some target audiences and not others. But maybe the more interesting one is this slide. These were new ideas that came out of the different focus groups for internal and external. Things we've heard, some things we've fast-tracked already, and we'll talk about those. We tried to break them up, by owned or if they're paid or earned. And I think, as Joel mentioned, I think last month, a lot of these new ideas are good, but we need to look at what new ideas we bring in and then what old ideas do we stop doing, what changes. And I think you'll see this next section we're really hoping is helpful for Joel and his staff to come up with an annual budget and look at what ideas to do and where we need to target and what's the right method to do that. So this is one example. This is the internal sort of table that's in your plan. This is multiple pages. We're not going to run through each line item, but we break down each method and look at the priority of it, the frequency, who we're targeting, what methods we're using. Is it the reach wide or narrow? And what's the cost, and then how does it relate to the goals? And so this is kind of what we've spent a lot of time on as we went through it. It's kind of boring probably to go through line by line. So we did include a summary image. And this can be a little confusing if you don't know what the icons are, but they do have the labels underneath them. And we tried to break this out. There's a wide reach at the top, narrow reach at the bottom, and then a cost when you go across the x-axis left to right. But you also see there's 2 other things in there. If there's a circle around them, we've identified that as an important tool that we've used in the past that we feel has been effective. And then you also see that some writing is bold and some is more grayed out. That's how we're showing the priority. So again, if you go back to the table, you can see that we tried to, for those engineers that like tables, this is great for you. For those on the other side of the brain, like a visual, we're trying to show the same information to help you see. And I think some of these things point out maybe where we're missing stuff too. But I want to point out some of the high priority items that we haven't used in the past that we think could be helpful. And so you look at some of the bold ones there. More public presentations. I think we heard this from a lot of people upstream especially, but we had some ideas there. Expanded social media, a Facebook page was specifically called out, and so were podcasts. And so we've done some work on those, and some of those may seem more like external communications, but they do work for both. So we also identify some of the challenges that I think are helpful for anybody new coming on the project. I think as you've seen, and you've probably seen as some of you are newer than others, you come on with a lot of new ideas and then somebody immediately goes, oh, we tried that, and that's going to be disheartening. And so it's nice when you can look at a document and say, okay, what are the challenges, and try to craft your idea around the challenges before you get shot down. I know we've seen that, and then people are reluctant to keep sharing. And so we want people to keep sharing and share new ideas. So we thought we'd just put everything we know down. You can read through this list, add to it if you had some good ideas, things that we've been challenged with in the past, but I think most of these were repeated over and over again as we went through, what didn't work and why. And maybe just to look at some of them, obviously we have a lot of changing personnel and elected officials. I think some of that's just natural, but with a project this long, it does create some, inconsistencies in sort of direction and identified leadership. Information changes on the project, both some of it's maybe avoidable and some of it hasn't been avoidable, but I think that's made the job tougher for a lot of internal, it's constantly changing, needs to be updated. I think as we've already addressed some of this with hiring of Joel, of course, but there's a lot of public staff on this project and it takes up a lot of time to really be in the know on everything. I think we continue to hear that from public staff about how much should they be involved and in the know or how not to. And then just, litigation and chair changes, and people just prefer different communication methods. It's one thing we learned from the data we got back is not everybody likes email. Some people want to be text, or some people still like the good old phone call or go out for coffee and sit down and talk about it. And so we're trying to learn those things every time we get a new member, a new commissioner or council member or whatever. And then lastly, it's a big project. So it's multiple geopolitical entities that just have different constituencies with different needs. So we'll switch to external for a minute. We base these 4 external audiences on our survey right here, and that's what that's showing. And so it talks about what we've used to reach each of those. Hasn't necessarily been the same across the board, but there is a lot of repeat information there. And then at the bottom is a lot of identified additional methods and how we think we can use those to target those residents. And again, we did this. This is probably even a bigger list of external methods. I think it's like 5 pages worth of this. A lot of them have been done. A lot of them are new ideas. And so it's something we're going to have to work through and what's the best to implement. Again, another one of these slides, you can see we've tried an awful lot of things. I think that's good. I think that we've learned a lot. And I think we've learned that some things that work better for audiences than other things. But by no means do we think we have it all. And as we look at this, we remember when A2S was first brought on the project in 2011, it was to build a website, and everybody thought that was cool and neat that we'd have a website. And so we've had to change what we do, as well as communication methods have just changed over the years. So you'll look at 2 of the bold items on there are high priority that we'll think have a pretty wide reach, and we think we can do it relatively affordably. Podcasts, we're excited. We shot our first podcast with Joel last week. Is it last week, I think? Last week. We brought back Darren Selvig. If you remember Darren, former newscaster, was on the project for a while early on as the interviewer. I think he makes a great host, and Joel did a great job really providing person-to-person information about the project, and we think we can dig into some topics. It's as simple as videotaping somebody for half an hour, and we can use the video and the audio and all sorts of things. And so we think a lot of the benefit is we can leverage it across a lot of different mediums. And then another thing we heard from several of you was that it's time to get a Facebook page. And so we've started a policy on that, because I think we've talked as a committee several times about this over the last couple of years. There's pros and cons, and there's an effort involved in it, and you want to make sure everything stays civil and appropriate. And so we're coming up with the right policies. We've learned from Mayor Judd and others who have a pretty good online presence and how they've managed their pages. And so we've tried to take some things from what people are doing currently. And we expect to launch a page in the next couple weeks. We'll have a policy developed that we'd like to run by you as well for how to do that. But I think we have a good plan in place, and we already have most of the content, videos, the flyovers, the podcasts, all those things are just meant to be shared on things like Facebook. And so we will ask for all of your support on the Facebook as well. Invite your constituencies and your friends, and as much as you feel comfortable on your personal pages, of course. I'm going to go to the next slide here because I think this points it out better. We did make this one for external based on frequency as well. And of course, you'll see in the upper right the things we think we've done well or has worked well, we do them frequently. Those ones that are circled. And you can maybe look toward the left on why we haven't done as many of the other ones. But what I like to point out here is that those on the bottom are ones we haven't developed. So those are a lot of new ideas that haven't been, sort of thought out and developed well enough yet to put them in place. But those are all options for consider in the future. And of course, you could probably say, why are some of those not circled as well, and what do we need to do to adapt those to make them more successful? But some of them are neat. I know construction site cameras, you'll see down to the bottom left, that's something that's been mentioned a lot. We expect, as the P3 team comes on board, that construction site cameras will be more interesting. And construction's heating up. It's one of those things you can log into the webcam and take a look at the site and kind of, engage and be interactive with it. Mobile app, we have one developed, but we haven't really put it into use yet. A lot of talk about a conference. I know the Red River Valley Water Supply Project does an annual conference that they invite legislators to and the public, and they get a pretty good turnout. And we certainly have enough content on our project to do a conference. Targeted television ads, there's always a purpose for those type of things, and billboards for certain campaigns or when we really need to get a message out. You'll see a 3D model is something that's been talked about for years on this project. It's really tough for people to understand how the project works often, and so a 3D model maybe potentially something that could be good for that. Of course, you see to the right things that we think would be more frequently used, but they're not developed yet. Recreational opportunities obviously has been in the news and in front of this and the board more, and engage with Moorhead Business Association. We've done some, but we know we need to get over on the Minnesota side more, and that would be a good group to help us do that. Anyways, but there's a lot more information in the plan. Here's some of the challenges related as we're getting toward the end of presentation here. But challenges to external audiences, I think we've all experienced these things, a consistent messaging, a consistent messenger, again, diverse audiences, different bases of trust. And that's a tough one to overcome, I think, once you get there. And I think hiring Joel was a good step toward establishing a new person that helps check the box on a lot of these. Misinformation about the project. Some of that is maybe more nefarious than others, but I think a lot of it's just projects changed a lot over 10 years, and it's tough to keep up. Changes are complex. It's a complex project, and they're very nuanced. New population, it's great we have a growing community, but there's a handful of people every day that come into the area that don't have that shared flooding experience and knowledge, so they wonder what it's all about. And then lack of diversion authority staff that can speak with authority and consistency. So as you can see, some of these things are being addressed, and so they're not revolutionary, but I think there's things we can still do to further meet those challenges. That's all I have on the communications plan. I know you haven't had a lot of time with the document in front of you, but if there's any initial reactions, I think we'd welcome that discussion. Otherwise, we'd really like to bring this up again at next month too, or in the interim, if anybody wants to sit down or give me a call or talk to us, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Any questions for Rocky?
This is Jake.
Rocky, go ahead.
I think, it would be nice if we had a large billboard that had a pie chart in the middle and a list of the things on the left that have been completed and a list of things on the right that have to be done, with a slice of the pie that shows what's been accomplished and what's being left.
Okay, that's a good idea. Where do you think the ideal location for something like that is?
Well, I think probably Main Avenue is pretty good. The interstates are pretty good. Either 94 or 29 going through Fargo.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just immediately comes to my head, we do have 3 interstate crossings on this project that will all have construction near it. And maybe that's an interesting, point to make as construction's happening near there. But that's something we can take back and filter into the plan.
We had, my wife and I had driven on I-29 south, and you go by the wild rice structure, and boy, they must have a pile of dirt that's 20 feet high there. It looks pretty impressive, and you can see, equipment bringing dirt up onto the top of that pile.
Yeah, we'll see an aerial shot yesterday. We have a video coming up of the wild rice structure, and yeah, it's changing pretty quick out there, pretty rapidly.
Hi, this is Shelley. I just have one comment. I am glad to hear that you guys are going to be, or that the communication plan will be looking at getting a Facebook. I do think that that is one way that information can be shared very easily. And so I'm glad that that is going to be occurring.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, I know it's 70 pages, and so it's a bit of a document, but if you have the opportunity to page through there, and we can talk about it again next month. And I think if I hear any comments in the interim, it might make some good discussion points next month. I can kind of consolidate those and bring them back.
Okay, Rocky, thanks. There's a lot of work here.
Just a couple more items on the agenda here, if I can finish off, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
So analytics, again, is in your handout. I think things heat up a little bit with construction happening. I think one thing that's maybe interesting is usually this time of year we see a dip in activity just because it's summer and people are usually outside and less on the computer. But I think over the last couple of months, we've actually seen a slight increase just because of the activity going on. I think that's good. I think it kind of works with our, I don't know if call it a strategy or plan, but we want to focus more on the project implementation now and what's happening out there. You're not talking about the design or sale of the project anymore. It's happening, and so it's nice to have the visuals that we have. You'll notice LinkedIn is added on there. We do have a LinkedIn page now, and there's a job posted on there, and Joel's linked to it with his personal page as well now, or professional page, I should say. And so as we add it, I think that's something that we hope to grow. There's a lot of interest in the professional community in using LinkedIn. So just make note of that. Couple activities
The host
planned.
has left the conference. The conference is about to end.
I'm going to pause my talking for a minute and see what's that's all about. Brian? Well, if it does end, I guess call back in because we'll get it working again. I haven't heard that one before, so I don't know what to do. So I'm going to keep talking until it gets cut off, I guess. We do have a couple of exciting outreach activities planned. The Diversion podcast. Again, this will be out in the next couple of days, I think. Exciting. I know a lot of people close to me that love podcasts. And so we think this is a good medium to try and see if we can reach a new audience. And we can expand on a lot of topics, I think, as we get into this. There's an echo from one attendee here. Could you mute your mic if you're not talking? Thank you. Again, social media development, that's really a Facebook plan. Huge item, North Dakota Water Topics Overview Committee. That's the Legislative Oversight Committee. They are meeting in Fargo in late September. I believe it's the same day as our next committee meeting is scheduled. I know leadership is talking about if we need to push back the meetings a week. So I think the board is going to talk about that maybe. But keep that in mind that this meeting may shift a week next in September to kind of work with that. And we're trying to figure out how that works with the maybe holiday months as well, so we can plan everything out through the rest of the year. It's a good opportunity. It's usually a 2-day thing when the legislature comes here, but I will maybe warn the committee. They did have a meeting scheduled a week and a half ago in Minot, and it got canceled because one member of legislative council got COVID, and they didn't have the meeting just for precaution's sake. So we're not quite sure what the plan is for September, but we're working on that. we're hoping we can still do a meeting and a tour of some sort. So stay tuned for that because we would like everybody to attend it if possible. I think it's a good opportunity for us to show off the project to our legislative leaders. And then this last item, it'd be nice to get some feedback, but I know our outreach team has really enjoyed the focus groups. I think it's nice format to really talk about the project and get feedback. And one thing we talked about, and Roger, this is something we'd like to sit down with you especially, but is talk about changing the format of the committee meetings a little bit to make it more like a focus group where, there can be some report outs, but we're really talking more about here's our plan for the next month, sort of the 30-day plan and maybe a 60 or 90-day plan, and talk about, okay, what are the goals for those items and what should we be striving for, so we can kind of address them that way and maybe urge some more discussion, because I think the focus groups is really helpful for our work, and we'd like the committee to kind of follow that same routine. I think you guys all have great topics, and so if we can find a way that's more conducive to the discussion, and obviously maybe that's difficult in the virtual sense, and focus groups were all before this whole thing, but we'd like to think about those for the future, next couple of months. I think that's the last item, but I don't know if anybody has any comments on those items.
Any comments or questions for Rocky? I like the idea of maybe smaller focus group in our committee. So more discussion going forward, per month. I think that's a good idea, Rocky, and we can come to the table with suggestions for the month. And
Yeah.
anything else? If not, do you know if we got a quorum yet?
We don't. I
I
know
don't
there
if anybody
was.
joined.
I know there was some communication with both Fargo and West Fargo's representatives on potential changes or not, and so they are both not here. But we'll try to get that locked down before next month so that there's not any. So we have an active quorum, I guess.
Sure, we'll just carry the minutes then into the September meeting. So if there isn't any other questions or discussion, we'll call for the adjournment.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I forgot to show the two videos.
Okay, yes.
Is that okay? Looks like we have a couple of minutes before it lands. I apologize. I was so excited about the communications plan.
Yep, go ahead.
So it's a 3-minute video and a 2-minute video. So we got 5 minutes. One's of the diversion inlet control structure. The other's of the wild rice. These were shot yesterday when Senator Hoeven was out there. And so it was a good opportunity, nice weather. About as update as you get. Again, apologize if you're online and this doesn't stream very well. I think there is happy audio that plays on this here, but sorry for that. There's no voiceover, it's just a audio track. But you can see there's a lot of concrete being poured and a lot of people working on the site. If you do have a chance to drive by, it's a pretty easy drive-by tour. It's pretty close to both county roads, 17 and 16. So. I'm not very good at staying quiet for 3 minutes. I know. So there we go. Perfect. I'll show the other one. This one's a little bit shorter. I think as Jake was talking about, you can see this from the interstate, and I think it'll become more and more easily seen from the interstate, but I think there's been a lot of progress since the last month we showed this. The interstate's I-29's on the right side of your screen over there.
Are both of these Ames construction jobs?
That's correct.
And then one question on the operation. Will the Red River control structure and this one work in harmony together then, or is one shut before the other one?
I'm maybe not the best one to answer that, but there will be a sophisticated operation plan for all three structures and how they work together. I don't think they, move up and down exactly the same way, but they are related to each other.
That's it.
Well, thank you. I think these are exciting to see, and I'm excited to have a Facebook page to share these because I think, it makes Facebook a lot more consumable when you have progress to show like this. So.
They show up real well on my computer, Rocky.
Well, thank you. That's good to know.
Yep, and mine too, out here at Leonard. So now we'll go back to motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Here, a second. All in
Second.
favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.